Hounds of Heaven. Welcome back into the David L. Gray Show, off code and unscripted on St. Dominic's Media, and we are live streaming on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, however you're listening, wherever you're listening. Thanks for tuning in. Got an awesome show for you today. Looking forward to your comments in the comment box. We're going to get into clapping at the Mass. It's one of my huge pet peeves at the Norris Ordo Mass. Remember when we used to do the Mass Nightmare series? We used to be all on top of the clapping. But recently, there was a meme that was going around social media, and I was really kind of shocked about some of the comments I was hearing from priests and from deacons about, hey, we can do this. No. We need to talk about that and explain why. And then after that, I got a review for you. From time to time, I review these Freemasonry instructional videos that Catholics put out, and I like reviewing them. Because sometimes they're horrible, right? So it's a teachable moment. But the one today is decent, right? I probably can't recommend it, but I'll give it a B, because there's just some fatal errors in here in this video that, again, provides a teachable moment to help us improve about how do we explain Freemasonry, the Catholic prohibition against it, to Catholics who are Freemasons. And that's a different audience. But I think for me, it's my audience is who I've been working with for the last 10 years. Trying to lead Catholics who call themselves Freemasons out of Freemasonry. And so with them, you have to be very precise. And I know sometimes you encounter these people. You email me, you tell me these people in your family, these Catholics who are Freemasons, and like you email me or inbox me and say, hey, David, what can I say? What can you do to help me? And so I like reviewing these videos to guide you along a path about what not to say. And so we're going to review that. And so let's not make this a long preface. Let's get into this. After this quick commercial about St. Dominic's Media, we would appreciate your support. Oh, by the way, I'll be speaking more about Freemasonry tomorrow on Eternal Life Plan with Christine. She'll have me on there. This is a pre-scheduled interview she wanted to do about Freemasonry. And so I'm finally going to go in there. We're finally going to get our schedule together. We're going to talk about that. So in longer form, I'll talk about this subject. And then on Thursdays, man, that's going to be a jam-packed day. We got 2 live streams back to back here at St. Dominic's Media. First, it'll be me on here on Off Code Unscripted. Speaking of Jackie Van Tyne, so she was born and raised a Catholic, left the Catholic Church. So I think it's dope that she agreed to come on my podcast and actually speak to an actual Catholic theologian to explain why she left the Catholic Church, right? Because on her video, it's I listened to it. She's speaking to an audience of one. And so now she's going to come have a conversation about this whole thing. So that's going to be very interesting. I never seen anything like that before. And then after that live stream, Bobby Hesley, Kyle Copey, my new partners at St. Dominic's Media. We're going to have our first show. We're doing a monthly or bi-weekly podcast called The Last Word. It's kind of like a Catholic roundup show. So really excited about that to really get into this apostolate with my partners. And so, yeah, man, amazing week here. Let's go ahead and get this after this quick commercial. I founded St. Dominic's Media. That's St. Dominic's Media. Found us at stdominicsmedia.com. I founded it in 2017 to be an apostolate that will really help people live a liturgical life. That is to inspire people, to teach people, to guide people to be in the world who the liturgy has formed and be through Dominican spirituality. Now, this takes money. It really does. Now, it's always been a case at stdominicsmedia.com that if you become a Hound of Heaven, a lifetime member, that we give you every book that we have ever produced at St. Dominic's Media, and every book we'll produce in the future. Those are yours. Those are your gifts for being a lifetime member. But we decided, because we really have to ramp up to 1,000 members very fast. So we decided that even if you join as a exclusive monthly member, we're going to give you a gift. This is how much we want to thank you for believing in us and in our mission. So for a limited time, if you go over to stdominicsmedia.com and you become an exclusive member, a monthly member, you can receive any book of your choice from our collection. So what that means is there's several books in our collection that we've published. So, and if you choose one of the books, we'll just send them to you for becoming just a $10 member monthly. So you can select books like this one, The Catholic Catechism on Freemasonry, one of my best-selling books, and another one of my best-selling books, The Divine Symphony. You can choose that one. We'll just send it to you for becoming an exclusive member. Also, you can receive just tomes like this, just incredible books like The Liturgy of St. Gregory, Theology by Dr. Nicholas Newman, which is an incredible book if you want to know about the early roots of the Eastern liturgy. So we want you to believe in us, and we want you to give you this gift for becoming an exclusive member. So hop over to St. Dominics Media. Please help us. Please join our mission. Become one of our members. Become a lifetime member if that's in your budget. And thank you again for believing in us. And we are back. Hey, so you may have saw this on your social media feed. Let me blow it up here. It was this meme going around, said no clapping during Holy Mass, not even after the final blessing. Who would have clapped at Calvary? Would the Blessed Mother and John the Baptist have clapped? It's a funny way, like it's sort of like a little straw man argument to get into the discussion, really to spark some sort of reaction. And I think it did its job. It was a popular meme that was going around. I posted it on my Facebook page. That's David O. Gray, Catholic theologian. Make sure you guys follow there if you get a chance. So, and when I posted it to my page, I was actually pretty shocked that you had priests and deacons coming in the comment section talking about this is okay. We can do this at times. We can make this exception. This is okay at certain times. I think that's the problem. Isn't that the problem? Right. I think the argument that we have, I think the people who have left the Novus Ordo and went to to the older liturgies, whether it's Eastern or Western, this is one of their major critiques, that it's not consistent, that there's too much ad-libbing, that there's too many exceptions that come. People just want consistent liturgy every day, every Sunday. They don't want. This is one of my biggest pet peeves. It really is. It and my wife and my daughter, they know this about me. For visiting in the church, whatever, and they start clapping. Right? They look at me because they know that I'm like just fuming inside. I just want to take a gun and just kind of like pop myself in the head. I just cannot take it. But I think there are some reasons why. Let's go over the reasons why people say, um, why priests and deacons and laity alike say, hey, it's okay to give applause at mass. Well, one of the reasons they say during, when it's some sort of time to be congratulatory. Let's show some human praise. There's something that's happened. Father's leaving, he's retiring. Some other people, maybe they're leaving the parish, they're going away. Um, so let's give some applause there, some sort of congratulations for some sort of work well done, or they're leaving. Sometimes people clap after liturgical music, maybe the choir, maybe the cantor, whatever you have, whatever situations there at the Novus Ordo. Maybe it was so great. It was so great. It sounded so magnificent that there was this natural reaction to bring into the church what we do out in the world, right? Out in the world, after some sort of production, after some sort of set, after a concert, yeah, we give applause. Good job, well done. So we want to bring that thing that we do in the world into the mass, right? People clap after homilies. Right. That's a very interesting thing to do as Catholics, right? Because we always hear the complaints, oh, these Catholic homilies aren't really good. I can't understand Father. He has a strong accent, right? So, but we applaud after homilies. We feel affirmed somehow. Maybe the homily convicted us, or maybe it made us feel good. So again, we want to bring into the liturgy something that we do in the world, right? After a comedian does something, or whether we've heard an eloquent speech, maybe a commencement speech, we want to give applause, right? Anniversaries. All right, here's a common reason why people give applause. You hear the clapping and human praise at the Novus Ordo. Anniversaries. Father says, who's celebrating anniversaries? Stand up. Who's celebrating a birthday? Stand up. You know, God forbid the organist starts keying happy birthday. This is a huge problem I have. The birthday one. I can almost tolerate the anniversary thing. You know, who celebrate anniversary? Oh, Bob and Karen. What you got? 50 years? At least the marriage, as far as we know, was a sacrament. All right. So in a way, we're giving thanks for a sacrament. I can almost roll with that. Almost. I still think that's the improper time. Maybe some sort of banquet, maybe over in the fellowship hall when you're having some donuts. Maybe over there that's a proper time, not mass. But birthdays, as Catholics, whose birthdays do we celebrate? Jesus and Mary. We celebrate their birthdays because we know at the point of their birth, at the moment of their birth, they were a blessing. From the moment of their conception, from the moment they entered the world, they were a blessing. The rest of us, we don't know. The world may have been cursed by your birth and your conception. We don't know how things were going to turn out after you were born, right? So that's why we celebrate you. If you're canonized, we celebrate the day that you died because we know that was a blessing. Job well done, right? So we celebrate the day that you died. So celebrating birthdays in the mass is so completely antithetical to what the liturgy is. Even like Catholic theology is trying to articulate about birth and death, and ashes to ashes and dust to dust. I could see if we're going to celebrate your baptismal renewals. Who's baptized today? Who's baptized this month? Right, so many years ago. What, you, Bob and Karen? Yeah, yeah. How many years you been baptized? I might even be able to tolerate that, but no, it'll be closer. So the problem with incorporating these things into the liturgy, besides the fact that they're very worldly, it's us bringing the world into the mass instead of us taking the mass out into the world. Aside from that, just the plain reason why we don't make exceptions to the missal is because these things are not in the missal. There's no point in time when you look at the order of the mass where it says, um, talk about birthdays or ask people to stand up for their anniversary, or after the homily, the people clap, or after the final blessing, it says in there the people clap. No, there's nothing in the order of the mass that says clap. There's nothing in it that says give applause. It's phenomenal to me that people will give human praise after the most mundane things, after people just doing their basic job. That's Father's job to give a homily. Why is he getting clapped? It's sort of like people clapping after the guy lands the airplane. You ever been on one of those airplanes and the airplane lands and people clap? What is that? We don't clap after a guy pays child support, right? You're just doing your job, right? You don't get claps for that, okay? So I don't understand that, but there's nothing in the missal that says give applause. So if it's not in the missal, this is what the church teaches. This is what Vatican II teaches. In Sanctum Concilium, it says that that no priest or bishop can make amendments or change the liturgy. So when you're asking people to clap, um, that's what they're doing, right? Brianna says, um, at coffee and donuts, your birthday can be announced in coffee and donuts. Don't, don't forget, don't disrupt the peace. Exactly. It's disrupting the peace. It's disruptive to the peace because it disorients what the liturgy is trying to do. I would say like this, that the greatest good of the liturgy, the greatest good is the Holy Eucharist. That's the greatest good that the liturgy has to offer. Is Jesus Christ, body, blood, soul, and divinity, comes to commune with us into our body. That's the highest good. You ever been somewhere? I think this is a case, a lot of places, a lot of workplaces, sometimes the military, that you don't speak after your boss. If there's some sort of um, event where the program says final remarks, it may be a priest, it may be your supervisor, something like that, maybe the CEO, right? Nobody speaks after the final remarks because no one else has anything to say. What more can you say? What can you add? It would be rude to come in and say, oh yeah, one more thing. That's not your place. So therefore, in the liturgy, the Holy Eucharist is the highest good. That's the great communication. What else do you have to communicate after that? There's just the final blessing. Go, you're dismissed. That's it. We have nothing else to say, right? In a Novus Ordo, of course, um, in the dismissal, right, there's a place in there that says brief announcements. Yeah, I wish that was removed. That's one of the things, when the Novus Ordo is finally reformed, that has to go. But when we're talking about anniversaries and birthdays and all this silly stuff, that's not brief announcements. It's not. Okay, so that's not the time, that's not the place. Again, the greatest good of the liturgy is the Holy Eucharist. The liturgy wants to do three things in that regard. It wants to prepare us for the great communication by healing us. That's why we had the sacrament, non-sacramental absolution. Through the Holy Eucharist communion, it wants to divinize us. We become what we eat. Right? And then the liturgy wants to, after it heals us, after it divinizes us, the next thing it does is what? It sends us. It says, go. You're not supposed to stay here. I get people who love the liturgy, right? They think it's so beautiful. Just wants to stay there. Um, I get that. I do. I get why people stay in their pew for a long time after mass is over. But in a way, that's also missing a point. That's not what the liturgy is for. It doesn't want you to stay. It wants you to go. It wants you to leave. Go. You are dismissed for what? To go do battle in the world. Nobody becomes a saint during the liturgy. I don't care what, because in the liturgy you have very limited freedom if you think about it. You're just speaking what the church has told you to speak. You're singing what the church has told you to say. You're hearing what the church has told you to hear. You're standing, you're sitting, you're kneeling when the church has told you to stand, sit, and kneel. Very limited freedom because you're being formed, right? You're like a child. Our children have very limited freedom. Just do what I tell you to do. Sit where I tell you to sit. Stand where I tell you to stand. The same way with liturgy, we're being formed, we're being prepared. We're children, right? And so it wants to heal, divinize sin. It sends us out to become saints, to exercise our freedom. Okay. So in exercising our freedom, that's how we become saints. That's how we prove who we are. Also, it sends us to go do battle in the world against the world, the flesh, and the devil. The liturgy has prepared us to be warriors. We have everything we need. We have everything we're equipped that we need to do battle in the world, right? We are the warriors. The priests are the clerics. They're the healers. They participate in the ministry of the great healer, Jesus Christ. Their place is the sanctuary. Their place is the mass. Us, we are the warriors. We're the ones who go out and do battle. Then we come back to the cleric for more healing, perhaps during the week, maybe next Sunday, maybe during the sacrament of penance and reconciliation, right? So don't be afraid to go out and do battle, because that's what you're prepared to do. That's what the liturgy is for. Don't sit there, go, right? Heal, divinize, go. So what clapping does, it disrupts that flow, right? Right. We've been prepared. The final rite is, I talk about in my book, The Divine Symphony. It's like a it's like a pep rally. That's what it is. We receive Jesus Christ. Now the priest is like, go, 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 go. Right. But we want to disrupt that with some sort of clapping. Who claps? Who does this type of stuff before battle? Nobody. This is weird. It's like, oh, pause before you guys do battle. Let's clap for Bob and Karen. It's dumb. Let's just call it dumb. It's not liturgical. Okay. And the feast of purpose of the liturgy. So I don't know how we get away from that. Um, we can continue to encourage our priests just to do what the liturgy says to do. We can let them know we don't want human praise. We don't need this. Show us Jesus Christ. That's what we come here for. We don't want to see Bob and Karen. They're nice. We'll talk to them, you know, in the reception hall, whatever, fellowship, right? But I came here for Jesus Christ. Stay focused. All right, let's get into let me take a couple of your comments and then we're going to get into the Freemasonry review. Laram says landing of the plays or plane. I think it says thanksgiving to God that you reached the ground alive. Yeah, and I definitely say a prayer for the pilot. When we're flying, I don't clap after movies. I don't clap after. I'm not a clapper, right? Especially when people are just doing their job. I say a prayer though. He also says education is always needed, even for the liturgy. All right, let's go. Right after this brief commercial, I'm going to start the Freemasonry review by Voice of Reason. Take a look at his lecture. This is David L. Gray Show. Off code, unscripted. Welcome back in to the David L. Gray Show, off code unscripted. Let's get into this review of Voice of Reason. And like I said, I never heard of this guy until recently. I was talking to Bobby, and next thing you know, this guy's video started showing up in my YouTube feed, but he seems pretty cool. I've seen the titles of some other of his videos. I think I like him. His voice is kind of interesting though, right? I'm listening to him, and he sounds like at any point in time he's going to say, "Adrian, Adrian." Yeah, he has this like Rocky voice, right? And I love Rocky, right? I love all the Rockies. I watched all of them, even the Creeds, right? So, so he has that that voice kind of tickles me a little bit, Adrian. So, but I guess let's just start with my background information before I get into the voice of reason first critique. So, for those who don't know, prior to me becoming a um, Catholic, I had spent 10 years, over 10 years as a Freemason at the so called highest levels of Freemasonry, as they say, right? As a Grand Lodge officer, one of the second highest appointed Grand Lodge officer. I had written a number of books on Freemasonry. I had traveled different parts of the world speaking about Freemasonry. About 5 to 7 years into my Masonic career, Freemasons were calling me an expert on the subject. That's how well advanced I was. I had become a member of a research society, a founder and editor in chief of another Masonic research society. I had become a fellow of another Masonic research society. So I was what you would call a Masonic academic, right? So into Masonic scholarship. And, the head of various different Masonic houses, altogether, I would say, all the degrees I received and throughout Freemasonry and all the Masonic rites, over 50 degrees. So I was that guy. And then I had my conversion to Christ, right? I was in the process of committing suicide, and Jesus said, I'm trying to suffocate myself. And in the process of doing that, I hear a voice. The voice says, I love you. I'm here. And even as a district deputy of the Freemasons, I was very anti-Christian. I remember I used to tell the worshipful masters of the various lodges that I was given charge of in Western Ohio that when I come inspect you, I don't want to hear any prayers in Jesus' name. Right? I was just enforcing a long-standing rule in Freemasonry, but it was a personal issue I had. I didn't want to hear the name of Jesus. So I was very anti-Christian. So for Jesus to come to me, and as soon as I asked the question in my head, like, who was that? Right? Because no one's around. The answer that came back was Jesus. I'm like, what? That's just a crazy answer. It's still crazy to this day how he had mercy on me when I deserved death. So I read the Gospels for the first time in my life that night, and I was I've been in love with Jesus ever since, for saving my life and for revealing the truth to me. Um, so I think that's about it as far as my background, how it relates to this subject, how I got into this. And I really didn't plan to get into this, so to speak. I thought I would just leave Freemasonry behind. When I was in RCIA, I heard that Catholics cannot be Freemasons. I investigated it, found it to be true. So I just ended my Masonic affiliation, right? Before I was confirmed into the church. And I was on August 8th, 2006. Feast of St. Dominic. So I thought I was going to leave this whole subject behind. I never thought, oh, why should I have to talk about this? This is what the church teaches, right? This is a settled issue. I had no idea I was going to discover not only there are a bunch of Catholics who are Freemasons, perhaps worldwide, about 20% of Freemasons are Catholic. So many members of the Knights of Columbus are Catholic. Uh, the predominantly black, culturally black Catholic Church is infested with Freemasons. No idea I was going to counter this stuff. So that's when I started, writing about it a little bit. Then I discovered that one of the problems that we're having with converting Catholics who are literally excommunicated, getting to them to leave Freemasonry, what I discovered in my ministry to them was that there's a lot of myths that Catholics and Protestants promote that aren't true, and that discredits us. Imagine going to a car dealership and you know everything about this car that you want to buy. And you're showing the salesperson some grace because he's trying to teach you some things. But then you hear him say something that's not true about the car that you know is true. you instantly lose respect for him. He loses your credibility. And perhaps you don't even want to buy a car from this guy. Right. That's the situation we run into with Freemasons who call themselves Catholic. Right. We don't do a good job articulating to them what the church teaches. We want to get caught up in these myths about Freemasonry, and that loses them. So it's a huge problem. So the work I've been engaged in for the last over a decade is trying to one minister to Catholics who are Freemasons. I think I had some success, and there's still some knuckleheads that won't get with the program, but um, but also I've been trying to help Catholics speak coherently and consistently with the magisterium about why Catholics cannot be Freemasons. The biggest problem I run into, though, is with what I call Rad Trad Inc. Rad Trad Inc. They have this tendency to speak about. They always blame Freemasonry for stuff, right? Whatever it is, the weather's bad. Oh, it's those Freemasonics, as they call them, right? It's this weird propensity that they have to always point the finger hours to the Freemasons, which I really don't get it, other than it being like a scheme to raise money, right? But Rad Trad Inc. They keep teaching these myths about Freemasonry. Not only do they point to Freemasonry as always being a problem about everything, but then they purport they teach these myths that largely most of them started by a guy named Leo Taxel a few hundred years ago. Leo Taxel spent about 10 years, no, I'll say about 5 years, pretending to be a Freemason. And he would write these anti-Catholic tracts against the Pope. The Pope is involved in orgies and all this stuff, and Freemasons reading this stuff up, right? And of course, it's in Italy. And then he switched his scheme. He switched his grift. He claimed to have converted to Catholicism, and then he began writing these anti-Freemason tracts. And he found that Catholics were an amazing audience. He found out the more outrageous things he says about Freemasons, the more books he'll sell. That Catholics just couldn't get enough of these stories that weren't even true. Right? A couple of the myths that we still hear is a lot of them. Some of the most popular ones that there's Leo Taxel started as things that in Freemasonry there's degrees within degrees. You hear that, right? And he says that Freemasons don't know the truth until the highest levels. You've heard that. That comes from Leo Taxel. He also said that Freemasonry is satanic. Right? That's Leo Taxel. Now you're saying, wait, David, isn't that true? Because then Pope Leo 13 say that. Then Pius IX says that then it's Satan or something like that. We understand that Leo the 13th was heavily influenced by Leo Taxel. He even meets Leo Taxel at one point in time and says, "Hey, I've read all your books. And me and Cardinal Rampolia here, he's a very, very notable cardinal. He's saying, hey, we were both Freemasons in our youth. Not to be alarmed here by this news. It's kind of like back then, it's kind of like what we saw in the early 1900s in Germany. Everyone, if you're a young man, you belong to Hitler's youth. You were just initiated. So a lot of young men in Italy and France became first degree Freemasons, right? No cause of alarm there. But so Leo Taxel heavily influences Leo the 13th. Right. So we don't, but even still with Humanigenus, we don't say it's in error where he says, Freemasonry is satanic because it is demonic for other reasons. So it's not an error, but we just have to, just understand, who influenced him. So very interesting story that, but even to this day, Rad Trading purports they spread these myths that started by Leo Taxel. So that's really the work that I've been engaged with, but it still goes on today. I think Taylor Marshall's book Infiltration harmed the cause a great deal. It's made my job a whole lot harder. And then you take a look at stuff like this. I just saw this recently. Um All right, Kennedy Hall's channel, he talks about Freemasonry all the time, right? I don't get it. It's to the point where we have to wonder whether is he a Freemason, right? Because it keeps pointing the finger that way. Like, are we supposed to, pay attention to something else here? Why do you keep pointing that way? Right. But he puts out stuff like this, right? Saying Freemasonry is the reason why there's no modesty with women. And then it puts people who know the truth in an awkward position, right? And I can't stand people who are not interested in the truth, right? Another reason why I can't stand Kennedy Hall. One reason is because he's talking about the Norris Ordo Mass as a near occasion to sin. I'll punch you in the neck. That's very offensive to Jesus Christ, right? If it's good enough for Jesus, it should be good enough for anyone else. Right? I get why you may not want to go because you like a more beautiful liturgy, but never say that's a near occasion to sin. You're saying something about Jesus Christ that's very offensive. But he's just not interested in the truth. And then it puts people who don't know the truth in this awkward position because now we have to defend something. Like in the case of Freemasonry, they had done a great deal to protect the modesty of women. Have you ever seen Eastern Stars? They wear these long dresses. All the women, all the female orders, they wear these long dresses, very modest, very covered. Their heads are always covered when they're in their um little pagan temples. In Austria, a very interesting story. Austria has always been infested with Freemasons. This is where you find people like Mozart, becoming a Freemason, people like Haydn. Okay. And at one point in time in Austria, the women had adopted the clothing style of the Freemasons. So that's where women start wearing gloves. Right. They were also wearing aprons, but so Freemasonry had done a great deal to protect the modesty of women. And so he's just not interested in the truth. This video that came out, I made a long video in response to this dumpster fire by Father Chris Solar. You can still find on my YouTube channel. One of the worst videos you'll ever find about Freemasonry by a Catholic. The video is complete trash. I had to put like an hour response out about it because it's just a dumpster fire. I even let Father Chris Solar know, hey, this is horrible. Right, and then he defends it. Then that's when I realized he's not a very humble person. Right, so I was kind of, I'm done with this guy. Right. So, but this type of stuff I've been fighting against. Now, I would like to say transitioning to Voice of Reason. I think his name is Alex. Um, he does, I think, a really good job. First of all, he doesn't use the word Freemasonic. I didn't hear him say that one time. I thought that was amazing. He seems to have done research on the subject. Okay. Obviously, I don't think he read my book, but also at the same time, he didn't use the same sources as Father Chris Alar. Right? He seems to maybe went to Wikipedia. He seems to maybe have some conversations as well with some people who may have been Freemasons. So he does a really good job. And we'll go over, but there are some things he said in the video. Like I said, I'll give him a B on his lecture. I can't recommend it. I cannot recommend it because he does make some fatal errors I'm about to go over, just for a teachable moment to help you improve how you speak to Freemasons, especially when you encounter the Catholic ones. Um, I would like to say, no matter how much you study about Freemasonry, nothing replaces practicum. We can apply this to anything. I can read as many books about brain surgery as I want to. I may even get some sort of MD or whatever degree in neuroscience or something like that, right? But if I sit down and speak with Ben Carson, he's gonna know right away that this guy just has book knowledge. He has no practicum. He's never been in a surgery room. He's never done brain surgery. There's just some details. There's some nuance to the thing that only people who have the practicum know about, right? Same with coaching. I don't care how many books you read about coaching. Bill Belichick will sniff you out in probably like the first 2 minutes. This guy's never coached. Right? There's just some things. Okay. And this is important to know when you're speaking to Freemasons who are masters of Freemasonry, who really understand Freemasonry. You just can't tell them stuff and expect them to believe it. And in fact, if you do just say stuff, your research, you're going to lose them. Right? This is why it's very important. Just stick with the church teaches about why Catholics cannot be Freemasons. So I'm going to go over a couple clips just for teachable moments with Voice of Reason. And first thing we're going to go to what he said about the 30th degree, the Knight of Kadosh, or the Knight of Black and White Eagle, the 30th degree of the ancient Scepter Scottish Rite. Then we're going to go over what he said about the origins of Freemasonry, the origin myths, as I call them. I think he calls it retroactive memory or something like that. Then we're going to go over what he said about women Freemasons and Black Freemasons, and then he's going to talk about, and then the fourth thing he said about women's groups and children's groups. The last two are just small things, I think, but while I'm in this, I'm just going to go over it anyway. But these first 2 points about the 30th degree and what he said about the origins of Freemasonry are fatal errors and things you don't want to repeat. Right. So let me bring up this one first.
In Freemasonry, there are different types of Freemasons, right? If Freemasonry is the big overarching group, within Freemasonry, there's all of these different types of Freemasons, right? There's the Blue Lodge. The most famous one is the Scottish Rite, right? And the Scottish Rite actually doesn't have just 3 degrees of Freemasonry; they have 33 degrees of Freemasonry, right? There's the Scottish Rite. There's the Knights Templar, there's the Illuminati, there's all these different groups within Freemasonry. But the most popular one in the West is the Scottish Rite. And when you get to the 18th degree in the Scottish Rite, it's called the Rose-Croix degree. It reinterprets the cross and its INRI inscription as pagan symbols. We all know that INRI is Latin. It's Jesus Nazarenus Rex Eodeum. How do you say the I part? Eodorum, right? Which means Jesus Christ, King of the Jews. Well, again, they go back and they retroactively reinterpret history, and they say that INRI, that inscription is a secret Masonic message. Not true. Anyway, and if you're a candidate for the 30th degree in the Scottish Rite, which is called the Knight Kadosh, guess how you are initiated into the 30th degree? You have to trample over a papal tiara. You know, back in the day, popes used to wear these really big, beautiful, they were called the papal tiaras, right? What they would do is that they would put the papal tiara on a skull, and then they would have to step on it, and they would have to get like a lance, and they would have to stab the skull with their lance, wearing the papal tiara. And that was part of their initiation, signifying that they hate Jesus Christ and his vicar, because they do. And they cry down, "Down with the impostor." The Pope is the imposter because to them, Jesus Christ is the imposter. Because Jesus Christ can't be God to them, because God isn't a person. God is nature. It's a naturalistic religion. And then he will vow to propagate the light and overthrow superstition. So now, religion went from being tolerable to later on, religion is just superstition, and we need to get rid of all religion. And fanaticism and intolerance and all of these qualities that are implicitly identified with Catholic Christianity.
All right, so I'm gonna, before I respond to that one, I've responded to the subject in length already about the 30th degree. This is a huge foul for Voice and Reason. I think there's an I think if you're going to speak about this subject, right, I think your first go-to sources would be someone like John Salza. It would be me. People who actually had a practicum or are now Catholic, right? I don't think you just dismiss some of your best sources. And I've spoken about this a number of times. Here's one video where I addressed it, and then I'll come back and I'll talk about the rest. 18 Catholic Encyclopedia. It says this about what it calls the Kadosh, or the 30th degree of the Scottish Rite. It says that there is a trampling on the papal tiara and the royal crown. that is destined to wreak just a just vengeance on these high criminals for the murder of De Molay. A source for this information is Albert Pike, who was a general in the Confederate Army during the Civil War. He also served as the Sovereign Grand Commander of the southern jurisdiction of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite. And he really, from 1859 until 1891, he was a sovereign grand commander, and he's principally responsible for rewriting or creating their rituals and degree work for the degrees of the Scottish Rite from 1st to 33rd. So this claim of trampling on the papal tiara in the Kadosh degree, and let me put a clip up here of so you can see the entry from the Catholic Encyclopedia. This is here. And so this really had become the source for that information that for about the next 100 or so years will really be like the source information for many Catholics in their apologias in defense of the Catholic position against Freemasonry. Even recently, there was an essay that was written in this publication here called The Message. Okay. So you can see it here. And it was written in the Southwestern Indiana's Catholic Community newspaper. An essay here about Freemasons and the Catholic Church is written by Father Alex Zinhofer. And as you see in the essay, he repeats this what is now a myth and is not true about what happens in the 30th degree. And Father Alex says that when one reaches the 30th degree in the Masonic hierarchy, called the Kadosh, the person crushes with his foot the papal tiara and the royal crown and swears to free mankind from the bondage of despotism and the heraldom of spiritual tyranny. So, and then recently, Jesse Romero had mentioned this same thing, this same story, in an interview in one of his recent radio shows. Here it is.
Replicated in every seminary in the world. It is exemplar, close quote. Yep. When you get to the highest levels of Freemasonry, you have to step on a papal tiara and smash it under your feet. It is revealed when you get to the 32nd and 33rd levels of Freemasonry that the great architect that you've been praying to, they tell you, by the way, he's Lucifer. So it isn't revealed. It isn't revealed until you get to the 32nd and 33rd degree that you've been praying in this prayer to the great architect. You've been praying to Lucifer the whole time.
And the Illuminati, right?
Yeah. The Illuminati. Oh my gosh. So this is, I think, a huge file. Voice of Reason did here. Again, overall, I think he did a good job in this video. Here it was an unforced error. I mean, he could, I think, have easily discovered this. I mean, enough videos about this subject. And the reason why this is so problematic, again, if you're speaking to a person who is a Freemason, who did go up to Scottish Rite, did get his 32nd, 33rd degree, he's looking at you like you're crazy. Because there's a huge chance, it's most likely the case, I would say, that he did not ever see anything in a 30th degree had anything whatsoever to do with a papal tiara and a crown. That was never the case in the ancient accepted Scottish Rite or northern jurisdiction, which most, I think, I would say most Scottish Rite Freemasons belong to. This is largely the Atlantic states, the New England states, the Great Lakes states. This is the largest group of your 32nds, right? Now, if you belong to the Scottish Rites, the southern jurisdiction, In a Southern jurisdiction, their degrees were written by a guy named Albert Pike, right? And it is true that the Southern jurisdiction version of the 32 degrees were exported to other countries. It's being worked in England. It's been, Europe largely, Australia. Right? It's the one that's largely exported. That's true. But again, we're talking about numbers here. Most Scottish Rite Freemasons never saw Albert Pike's degree. Right? So they don't have so you tell them, yeah, you stepped on a papal, stabbed the papal tiara and all this stuff. No, that's you lost them, because that wasn't their experience. So we have to stick with facts. Also, for the last 2 decades, that degree has been reworked in a Southern jurisdiction. So the Southern jurisdiction doesn't even have that degree anymore. So again, this is a foul. And we lose credibility when we repeat these things that aren't true. A Freemason listening to you, he may be on the line, he may be on the hook, like, man, yeah, so I can't be a Catholic and a Freemason. And you're talking to him, yeah, in the 32nd degree, you stabbed the papal tiara. He's like, hey, if that's not true, what else are you lying about, right? You lose your credibility. Now, but why was that degree in there in the first place, right? I'll talk about that. But in the other video I just linked, I just showed you footage of. You can find it on my YouTube channel. Just type in Kadosh, Kadosh, and it come up. It's a much longer video with much more details. But I'll go into it briefly here. So the degree is really just recapitulating what happened with the Knights Templars back in the early 1300s with King Philip and Pope Clement V. Right now, King Philip, he had been trying for a very long time. King Philip the Fourth, I believe, he had been trying for a long time to get rid of the Knights Templar. People say it's because he wanted their land, he wanted their money. Right, that's what some historians say. But he could not find a pope of the Catholic Church to go along with this machination until some would say, rigged the election to get his man in place. That's Clement V. And so Clement V, he goes along with this scheme. He's a bit reluctant, though. He's a bit reluctant. At some point in time, he starts to change his mind, and he goes back and forth, right? But he finally capitulates. And yeah, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, de Molay, and a bunch of others, they're tortured for a long time. And they finally admit to charges such as heresy, heresy, sacrilege, Satanism. They torture these guys, and these guys admit, yeah, I was sacrilege, right? And they're given the death penalty. Next thing you know, King Philip, he has all the land, he has all the money that belonged to the Knights Templar, right? So it was a win for him. Clement Pope Clement, he's not a bad guy at all. I think he redeemed himself. He's largely responsible. He played a huge role in the fact that we have the Feast of Corpus Christi, right? So, but he seems to have been used by Philip. So that's a historical fact. Now, what happens in Masonic degrees, the degrees of Freemasonry and the Masonic orders, what tends to happen in these degrees is this. There's a historic story. There's a story from history that becomes a story of the degree. Sometimes a story is edited to fit the purpose of that degree. Or sometimes, like in this degree, the Kadosh degree, there's an interpretation of it that advantages, whatever that degree is about. In the instant case, the Freemasons or the Knights of the Kadosh, they want to make themselves a victim. Oh, we've been victimized, right? They put down our Grand Master, de Molay, for false charges, right? So they're playing these victims. The whole degree makes them a victim. And what do victims do, right? They have this sort of reaction, right? They have a temper tantrum. And so they stab the tiara, call him an imposter pope because he cooperated with a bad king, a fake king. And so, yes, the degree is very anti-French. First of all, it's a strike against France and their kings, and also it's a strike against the papacy, right? So it's a very anti-French, very anti-Catholic degree, right? Based upon a historical fact, right? But as I said, since 2001, due in part to people working at the Vatican, people like McCarrick and others in the Vatican, they worked with the Southern jurisdiction of the United States to get the anti-Catholic stuff taken out of the degree. Why they wanted to do that is a whole nother show. We can speculate about that. What was Cardinal World doing at the Scottish Rite Temple in Washington, D.C., visiting them and gathering evidence that they got rid of that stuff in the 30th degree? That's a whole nother podcast. We can get into that. Okay. But the fact is that we really need to stop need to stop telling that farce, that fallacy, that bad research that Voice of Reason got into here. And that, one of the reasons why I cannot recommend his video, especially to a person who is a Freemason, because something like that will completely lose them. All right, now let's play the next clip. This one, he gets into the origin myth.
But they also, so check this out. This is what Freemasons do. These people are crazy because they will actually retroactively apply themselves to the origins of civilization. Freemasons, who were founded on June 24 to 1717 in England, will claim that this group actually.
And let me pause that as well. This isn't a biggie. So I think most Freemasons will understand where you're coming from if you want to get into like the origin of the Grand Lodge system. You say, yeah, they're founded in 1717. I think most Freemasons will give you grace on that. But as a person who was a Masonic academic and a scholar, I would push back there. And, I would have said something like, well, we're actually looking at 1716 is the actual founding, right? And this is a little bit problematic for Catholics because I know Catholics like to say the 200-year thing. They say, 1717 Freemasons were started. 1517 Protestantism started. 1917 the Bolshevik Revolution with the communists, right? 1716 sort of throws off that whole math thing, right? But there's just something that you should be aware of if you want to go around telling Freemasons, 1717. Right? I wouldn't even put yourself in that trick bag.
Always existed. They were always around. They will claim that the Freemasons were there with God. They call God the great architect. That's how they refer to God. They don't give him a name. He is the great architect. And that God himself founded Freemasonry and that it had for patrons Adam, the Adam that we read about in Genesis, the patriarchs, the kings and philosophers of old, and even Jesus Christ. Did you know that Freemasonry teaches that Jesus Christ was a Freemason? And that Jesus Christ was the Grand Master of the Christian church. Jesus Christ was really a Freemason, ladies and gentlemen, and he started Christianity to insert the esoteric truths of Freemasonry into it, and that if we're smart enough, or we know, the natural world enough, we'll understand the true hidden meaning, the esoteric meaning of Christianity. And they also say that the Freemasons were the ones who built Noah's Ark, the Tower of Babel, the pyramids in Egypt, and Solomon's Temple. Solomon's Temple was built by Freemasons, not by Solomon. And again, this is a retroactive history. They just go back and they say the Freemasons are responsible for all of this.
Now, this is one of those things I think is a huge foul as well. And typically, whenever someone says They say, without naming they, it's usually, not completely true, right? Let me get to Paul's question first. Paul asked, so is Lucifer ever invoked at any level or degree? I think people get this largely from Albert Pike's. We mentioned him shortly before, his morals and dogma, his interpretation on his degrees that he wrote, right? So now you don't see light bearer or Lucifer mentioned in any sort of the mainstream degrees. I think that there is a version of the Scottish rites worked in France. I think the system is called Ledroit, I want to say. So they have, I think, females and males. They're sketchy. They're Satanists as well. I mean, well, they accept people who believe in Satan or atheists. It's a sketchy. Even Freemasons would call it sketchy, right? So there they have a version of, I think, the 18th degree or something like that. I can't recall, where you do hear about Lucifer, right? And there's, I think, some interpretations of some words or some passwords that people may say, hey, what is that, a demon or whatever? But to answer your question, you can never say no completely, because there's so many different versions of things being worked, but not in any sort of mainstream. Again, it's one of those things. You go up to a Freemason, he's a Scottish Rite Freemason, and say, hey, you've said the name Lucifer or light bearer in one of your degrees. First of all, he didn't go through that degree probably at all. He probably sat there and he's just obligated, maybe given some sort of signs or, things like that, maybe taught some elements of the degree. But the whole degree wasn't worked for him. Like in a nice at Columbus, we will exemplify a whole degree. Just because we have 3 of them, 4. And it's most people's experiences in the Scottish Rite. They're not gonna all degrees are not gonna be exemplified. So again, most people's experiences are not gonna relate to your book knowledge. Okay. Now back to the, I talked about in my master class on this subject. You can go over St. Dominic's Media, take the course. But I talk about what I call the origin myths. Okay. Yes, you do have a subset of Freemasons who may believe in the origin myths. Either the Enlightenment myths, they would say people like Sir Isaac Newton or Voltaire, the Enlightenment people, so-called Enlightenment, which it wasn't enlightening at all. But the so-called free thinkers, like the philosophers, the first people who pushed back against the moral teachings of the Catholic Church, the people who really first started spreading relativism, they would say these are the philosophical founders of Freemasonry. All right, so you have that subset of group. Then you do have, a smaller subset who would say, yeah, Freemasonry started back with the pyramids in Egypt. And what they're saying in that sense, they're saying that the idea of building and how building applies to the human person, that's an ancient art. It goes all way back when God built up Adam. And so they're talking about not Freemasonry as the Masonic order, but the philosophy of building and applying tools to your life. They're talking about the naturalism of Freemasonry, that there's some things in life, there's some things that stonemasons use that you can apply to your life to make you a better person. It's not God in his grace, rather it's this working tool, right? And that's what they're talking about. They're not talking about really that I've really never met a Freemason who said Jesus was the first Grand Master. Never, right? It's never been my experience. But okay, so you do have those Freemasons. But let me say this. So they is right in a sense. There are some they who believe in the origin myths. But for serious Freemasons, most of the ones who you'll encounter that go to lodge meetings, who pay their dues, who are actually active in Freemasonry, these guys do not believe in the origin myths. Largely, they don't. they're going to look at you crazy, saying, "Hey, you believe that Jesus was the first Grand Master? Shut up! What are you talking about? Get out of here!" Right? You lost them. I remember back in 1995, I think it was 95. I wrote my first book on Freemasonry. It was called the Unveiling of the Third Veil, something like that. The Unveiling of the Third Veil, I think it was called. And I shopped the book around to some Masonic publishers. This is 95. And I think, yeah, I was still in college. Yeah, I think I was like a junior in college. I wrote this book. And I shopped it around. And one publisher, he was like really nice. Um, and um, and he wrote me back this letter. I don't know if I still have it. He wrote me back this letter. And so in the book, The Unveiling the Third Secret or Degree or something like that, I don't know. I was talking about the origin myths. I was saying, yeah, Freemasonry started back in Egypt. That the people in the lodge, the Orphan Master, the Junior Warden, Senior Warden, they represent Ra, Osiris. I was related to like the Egypt and all that stuff. And he wrote back a really nice letter, and he said, "We've moved past that. We no longer believe that sort of stuff. That's no longer mainstream. We can't publish your book for that reason. But hey, here's some resources of some things you might want to read, and here's some people you may want to talk to." They were like so nice and polite by calling me a complete idiot and a buffoon, somebody not serious, without saying that I was a buffoon, an idiot, and somebody not serious, right? But it helped me. And I was really prideful, I would say back then. And I was still publishing a book anyway, sold some copies, whatever. But I think that was really my turning point, getting embarrassed like that. That made me take Masonic scholarship more seriously and really get into the actual origins of Freemasonry, which is interesting. Freemasonry as an organization, is very Catholic at some point in time. We're talking about the guild system, right? The guild system back in the 600s, 700s, very Catholic. These builders of the cathedrals and the monasteries, they always had a priest associated with their lodge. They celebrated the feast days, in particular St. John the Baptist, St. John Evangelist. Now, as time goes on, by the time we get to the 1500s, the guild system in England and Europe becomes very Anglican, and then it becomes very Protestant. So by the time we get to 1717, we're seeing 1716, we're seeing early 1700s. Really, we've seen a huge disruption in the guild system. First, because of things becoming more mechanized, and we're moving from guilds to corporations, right? But also because of the infighting of different Protestant groups. So at one point in time in London, you had over 20 guilds of stonemasons. One reason why you had that many, because this one over here, they were Presbyterians. This one over here, whatever, Quakers, Anglicans, whatever. Your guild system was starting to be divided by like denominations. So if you're a Catholic, if you belong to the Church in England, you got to belong to the right. This was a money issue. This was starting to affect people's bank account, right? So a lot of people don't talk about this, about the impetus of starting the Grand Lodge system in 1716 and 1717 was because of money. These guys want to get together and say, look, let's put our religious differences aside and let's get this money. All right? Let's stay together. Let's make this bank, as a young kid say. Let's make the bag. So that was a huge reason. It wasn't really philosophical. It wasn't anything anti-Catholic about it necessarily. It was Protestants doing what Protestants do. So that's really so that's one thing. So we want to stay away. So to wrap this section up, we want to stay away from the origin myths. Okay. Saying, oh, that's what Freemasons believe, that Jesus was the first Grand Master. I think Greg Sneed was here. Hope you don't mind me saying, at one point in time, he was a Grand Master of the state of Ohio. He's one of appointed me to one of the highest positions. He says, neither have I. Talk about. So you even have a Freemason, one of the most influential and powerful Freemasons, I would say, in the United States, watching his live stream, and he's confirming. I never heard that one. So appreciate that. Let me see. Let's go to this next one where he's speaking about. Now, these next two I'm about to show you, these aren't big fouls like the first two, but some little things here that you may want to avoid when you're speaking to Freemasons who call themselves Catholic and you're trying to evangelize them.
Freemasonry membership has gone down for years, 6 million worldwide. Why? Well, there's a general decline of fraternal organizations and service clubs, and then others attribute the falling membership to the movement's refusal to recognize women as full members. And also, not only that, guys, for the longest time, women weren't allowed to be Freemasons, and also black people weren't allowed to be Freemasons for a long time. They had to create a separate sect. They were segregationists. They created a separate sect for black people called the Princes, something like that, for just black people, right? And there was a growing public awareness of the movement's once secret rituals. You can Google a lot of it, and you can see the things that they did. They were like, this is weird, and they left it. And they're no longer powerful in the U.S. society. They're not needed for advancement in companies anymore, or civil service, or banking, or any of that.
Yeah, it's sort of that's not true. I've read that in a couple publications by Catholics. That they said that blacks and women were never allowed to be Freemasons. That's just flatly not true. We've always seen Africans as Freemasons. We've seen them in Austria. We've seen them in England from the very beginning. Also in the United States, it was never that they were not allowed, right? Again, in the United States, we see free black men being Freemasons. But what happens in the 1770s, around 1775, we do see a Irish regiment that was in the United States. I think they were pro-America. I mean, they're pro-revolutionaries, I want to say. The Irish regiment, they did initiate 14 men of African descent. They initiated them, and they also gave them a warrant to form their own lodge. And so ever since then, this is what he meant to say when he said princes. He meant to say Prince Hall. So Prince Hall was he was an educator. He's an abolitionist outside of Boston. And it's a very notable figure in American history. And so his group, they eventually started African Lodge Number 1. So this is in around 1775. So from that point on, you do have this set of Freemasons in the United States that's actually older than a lot of predominantly white Grand Lodges, who African Lodge eventually received a warrant from the Grand Lodge of England. So they were completely legit, right? And so you see the separate strand, but we've always seen African Freemasons from the very beginning, since the 1700s, Italy, everywhere, right? In the United States, it was a little bit different. But even in predominantly white Grand Lodges in the United States, very early on, you also seen men of African descent belonging to so-called predominantly white lodges. Not a whole lot, but this idea that blacks were not allowed to be Freemasons is a myth, and so you want to stay away from that. In the same way with women, the unique thing about ever since the Masonic exposés started coming out, I think around 1723. That's when we find the first time that the Masonic rituals are started being published, right? Ever since then, it's sort of like losing your copyright. It's sort of like your software becoming free source. Anyone can sort of use it. So ever since then, very early on, we started to see women Freemasons, so to speak. Yeah, they're not really recognized by your heavy hitters, your so-called Mother Grand Lodges of England, Ireland, Scotland. But you've always had a women Freemasons. Here in Germany, I think this is where you find your most women Freemasons. So it's not even a taboo subject. People know they exist. So you want to stay away from that myth that I keep hearing Catholics write and say that blacks cannot be Freemasons. That's kind of weird.
Members, they learn grips and hand signs and rituals, which again are kept super secretive, and they reenact their central myth, and it is a myth, which is the death and resurrection of this guy named Hiram Abiff, and he is the supposed builder of Solomon's temple. So Hiram Abiff is the guy that was like the original Freemason. He's the one that cracked the code of the universe, discovered the mysteries of God, and he built Solomon's temple. Which is interesting that they say that this guy is the guy that built Solomon's temple, but then they want to take credit for things before Solomon's temple was built, like the pyramids in Egypt. Maybe they just didn't pay attention in history class and they didn't realize that the pyramids and all that came first before Solomon's temple, but whatever. And American local lodges, they are grouped, like I've already mentioned, in straight grand lodges, and they're recognized by the Mother Lodge in London, so they're in communion with the Mother Lodge, right? And Master Masons' wives can join the Order of the Eastern Star. That's what the group of female Masons that are only the wives of male Masons, and their daughters are called Job's daughters. You know, Job from the Bible. And the Order of the Rainbow for girls. And their sons, the Order of the Demolay.
So again, this is one of those areas you kind of want to like stay away if you're speaking to a Catholic who's a Freemason or even a Catholic who's an Eastern Star, or whatever. You kind of want to stay away from, sort of these details. Okay. Again, our St. Thomas Media, you can sort of take my master class on the subject, but I would stay away from it and just really stick with the church teaches that a Catholic cannot be a Freemason. For the reasons why the church outlines, right? You can't take Masonic oaths. There's it's a competing idea there. If you're summoned to a lodge on Holy Day of Obligation, you have to choose, right? So Masonic oaths and obligations we have for Catholics, they are irreconcilable. Okay. Also, the Freemasons have their own moral law. The behavior of a good and true Mason is different than what the church is teaching. And also with popes talking about naturalism, Freemasons believe, or what, degrees teach, you can use certain working tools to make yourself a better man. In the ritual itself, there's nothing you hear about, well, it's God and his grace. All right. Now, largely Catholic, Freemasons are largely Protestants, you may hear them talk about that, how Freemason makes them a better Christian or whatever like that. But from the church's perspective, there's these things, like these are two complete different paths. All right. That is Jesus Christ and his church and the sacraments that make us holy. We really don't care about being a better man, right? We want to be holy, we want to be saints. So just to dumb it down a little bit, these are the reasons why being a Catholic and a Freemason are irreconcilable. We can no longer be Catholics and Muslim than be Catholic and Freemason. The church is looking at this just these things are incompatible. But what he's saying here, I would stay away from the whole Hiram Abiff legend here. It's not true that he is the first Freemason who cracked the code or anything like that. The story is teaching, you can download, you can Google this whole thing, that they're building King Solomon's temple. Hiram Abiff was like let's say a master mason. He was a chief, he's the organizing builder, he was the foreman on site or something like that, however you want to call it. And so, but he didn't have all the secrets. And here's another reason why you want to stay away from this, because you have really two different predominant sets of Freemasonry. You have your Anglos and you have your Continentals. The story about Hiram Abiff and his death and his the resurrection of Hiram Abiff, which didn't work, in two completely different ways. Your Anglos would say that the secrets were not found, while your Continentals would say the secret was found and is buried. These are two completely different ideas, right? So I would stay away from the whole thing because you never know who you're talking to. Just stick about why the church teaches you cannot be a Catholic and a Freemason. It's not true that women are Freemasons in the sense that he's talking about here. The wives, mothers, sisters, and daughters, they will not become Freemasons. And the groups that he listed, as far as the Eastern Star, there's a lot of other female Masonic groups that are either pendant, concordant, affiliated, or whatever that that women can belong to. And you don't, and every jurisdiction is different. It's kind of like, Freemasonry is kind of local. It's kind of like politics. Every jurisdiction, every Grand Master makes their own rules about what women can belong to, what female orders, right? It could be a niece. Maybe she doesn't even have to be related, right? She could be a woman, right? So I would stay away from the whole thing because that's very local. And same with the youth groups. There's more youth groups than the Demo Lay for the boys. There's more than Job's daughters for the girls. I think there's Rainbow Girls. And some jurisdictions have their own things, right? So I would stay away from little details like that. All right. So that is my review of Voice of Reason. And like I said, I think largely he did a good job. Far better than Father Chris Alar, whose video was a complete dumpster fire. But there's this one video. I guess I don't have a clip of it. But he starts talking about how Freemasons yeah, I don't have it. They say that, yeah, you don't know the secrets. You can't know Freemasons don't share the secrets, right? And that they don't share the secrets until you like stick around long enough and keep paying your money, and then you'll know stuff. But what you know is just personal information, and you can't reveal it. He sometimes in the video he gets so far off of, like, I don't even know who he talked to. Sometimes just the stuff is just weird, right? But I think at times he appears to know more information than what's on his PowerPoint slides. I would say that. But a lot of stuff he knows that's on his PowerPoint slide and off is just completely fiction. So, but overall, like I said, I'll give the video a B just because this is a curved grade. The standard is so low. We were talking about Father Chris Alar and some of this other crap I've seen. The standard is so low that it's not hard to get a B with me. But overall, again, I don't recommend the video. That you can go ahead and watch it. I wouldn't recommend that you repeat a lot of what he said in his video to a Catholic who's a Freemason if you're trying to get them to come back home to the church and make a good confession and leave Freemasonry, because they're going to think you're an idiot repeating a lot of the stuff that Voice of Reason said. So that's it. That's all I know about that. Let me get to a couple of your comments and then we'll get out of here. Mercedes says, yes, Father Allah has lost my trust for so many reasons, including the Freemason one. Yeah. I just don't understand, if somebody corrects you to the degree that I corrected you, why wouldn't you remove the video? That's just very prideful to me. It is. That doesn't sit well with me or a priest. It doesn't. Voice of Reason, like I said, I think he may have read some books. Definitely read Wikipedia. Father Chris Alar, I don't know where he got that stuff from. I don't know. It was weird. It's very unprofessional. All right. Brianna says, sounds like Scientology. Yeah. I don't know anything about Scientology other than like Tom Cruise belonged to it. But any like religion that's based upon like a fiction book is like a no-go for me. Like, you just can't start your religion based upon a fiction book. Scientology, Mormonism, you can't start with fiction. if you want me to take you seriously. Yeah. Thanks for coming in. I appreciate you being here. My former Grand Master is here when I was a Freemason. So that's pretty cool that he stopped in, listened to the whole thing. All right. Mercedes coming in. All right. Let's get out here. But I'll be on, like I said, I'll be on Eternal Life, her podcast tomorrow. Christine, she wants to interview me about my experience as a Freemason. She wanted to have this show for a long time. So we're getting together. So tune in more if you want to hear about my conversion, how I found Christ in his church, and some experiences I had. As a Freemason, as a very young man. All right. Talk to you soon. God bless you all. Love you. Thanks for coming in, and peace.